Thank you very much for asking me to speak today. I will be speaking in English, obviously, but I have lots of photographs, so hopefully that will help what I'm saying. I'm going to be talking today about a new museum for the University of St Andrews. St Andrews is in Scotland, and the university was founded in 1413, which makes it the oldest university in Scotland and the third oldest in the English-speaking world. Despite this very long heritage and the fact that the university has actually been showing off its treasures since the 17th century, a university museum was only established in 2008, and I'll be talking to you today about the process to create a new museum for such an old institution and how we made sure that what we created really matched the needs of our collections, of our university, and also of our visitors that we hoped would come. In the university itself, we have over 112,000 objects, and they really reflect the teaching and research practices and the staff and students of the university over the years. The subject areas covered range from early silver, including 3 medieval maces, right through to anatomy and pathology collections, from scientific instruments to fine art and geology and archaeology, and there's some examples on the screen, so it's a very wide collection of objects. We run 3 accredited museums. Musa, which is the museum I'll be talking about today, the Gateway Galleries, which is our temporary exhibitions venue, and the Bell Pettigrew Museum of Natural History. And in addition, we have 2 stores, one of which is an open access store where the public can come and look at our collections that are in store. The Museum Collections Unit manages all of these venues and the collections. We are 12 permanent staff with a number of student volunteers and casual staff, and all of the senior curatorial staff contribute to the research output of the unit. We are a central independent unit, but we have close ties to the School of Art History. In particular, we teach the students on the Museum and Gallery Studies postgraduate MA course, and also contribute to teaching and research in a wide range of other areas, for example, in classics, in social anthropology, in Scottish history, and in English as well. In terms of some of the background to the Musa project, the collections of the university obviously tell the story of Scotland's oldest university, but they also say a lot about the history of higher education in worldwide terms, and also about the early history of the town of St Andrews itself. During medieval times, St Andrews was the religious and educational capital of Scotland. There was a monastery, a cathedral, and a castle, so it made it the ideal site for Scotland's first university. But prior to Musa, the collections were spread out across a number of different sites. There was very restricted access. Many weren't suitable for visitors, and certainly not for education or any sort of interpretation opportunities. So whenever Musa became available, it's obviously a new venue, but in an old building. It's a 19th century coach house that was originally connected to the big historic house next door, which is the principal's residence. It's an excellent location for tourists, and it's also at the ancient heart of the university, and the museum opened in 2008. It was a £2.1 million project to create the museum. We raised about 60% of that externally, and the project was particularly supported by university alumni, past students, of which St Andrews, like many ancient universities, has a very strong and active community. So the aims for Musa, obviously to exhibit the treasures of the university together for the first time, to provide a secure and stable environment for these collections, and also, of course, to increase use of those collections and to encourage people to interact with them. Because we ran a number of other museum sites, we wanted Musa to act as a hub for our activities. And overall, the design and quality were to be, the design and contents were to be of a quality to reflect that of the parent institution, in that it's small but high in quality. Whenever we were considering what we should put in Musa, there was only very limited space, so we had to choose very carefully. What stories would visitors to the museum actually want to hear, and what did we want them to learn about the university? And how would they want to connect with our collections as well? There are, of course, a variety of different methods, from text panels on the wall and to interactives within the galleries, to talks, tours, an audio guide. And most importantly, really, who were our visitors going to be? And this took up a large part of our time in planning the museum and what we would put into it, actually defining the target audiences. So we used focus groups to define who these audiences were, and they came out as being schools, the local community in St Andrews, university staff and students, obviously, and also tourists to the town of St Andrews, of which there are many. In terms of designing the galleries themselves, we went for a mix of chronological and thematic. Gallery 1 is very much chronological. It looks at the foundation of the university and the early relationship to the town. It really sets a scene for a visit both to the museum and to the university, or even the town of St Andrews. Gallery 2 is much more thematic about the student experience, and obviously with contrasts over 600 years. And this gallery is particularly popular with both current and past students. Gallery 3 is the gallery that looks at innovation and enlightenment that has come out of the university across the 3 main teaching and research areas, of course, the sciences, arts, and divinity. And this is the gallery where we're most able to tune into school curriculum topics. Gallery 4 was originally a gallery that looked at the nature of museums and collecting and why the university has collected what it has. Our evaluation showed that visitors didn't really understand what this gallery was about, so we have now changed this to be a temporary exhibition space where we can look in more detail at the different areas of our collections. So we have 2 exhibitions per year here, and the themes are completely in response to what our audience tells us that they want to see. In terms of education and programming, we created a first floor learning loft, which is an educational space designed specifically for external schools groups and also for internal teaching. This is where we teach museum studies. It's a flexible multi-use space with lots of areas for arts and crafts, but also lectures and exhibitions as well. And it has allowed our programming to increase dramatically, as you'll see from the figures on the screen. And it's also a space that can be hired out for events, so there is an income generation element to it as well. And we also have the viewing terrace, which is arguably the most popular spot in the museum, certainly in the summer, and it has breathtaking views out over St Andrews Bay. So within the galleries, we developed a strategy for telling the stories we wish to tell and interpreting our collections and the history of the university for the different audiences that we had identified. Some of the methods of interpretation used are shown on the screen. Some are very hands-on, very heavily facilitated by our curatorial staff. And the others are much more visitor-led, where the content is supplied very much at a general level. And we use both of these methods in Musa, really to reflect the fact that people obviously learn in different ways. So our interpretation strategy really focused, of course, on what is special about Musa. It's the oldest university in Scotland. It is a museum solely about the history of a university, which is actually unique in the United Kingdom. What did we want our interpretation to achieve? We obviously wanted to make our collections accessible, but we wanted to create a context for a visit to the whole town of St Andrews. We wanted our displays to be innovative and also promote the university to potential students as well. We are, of course, interpreting our collections for those audiences that were identified at the very start of the project. And this has actually changed since the museum opened. So we now make sure to tailor all of our events for both communities and schools and temporary exhibitions to what we actually know about our audiences. And our priorities do change each year because, of course, we can't target all people at all times. How would the aims be achieved? Obviously, initially through this audience involvement, through the focus groups and the visitor surveys that we undertook prior to the museum opening. Eventually, of course, through the gallery displays and also through the Learning and Access programme and the outreach that we were undertaking. And finally, I will say a little bit more about this in a minute, but we wanted our strategy very much to be linked to specific learning outcomes, i.e. what we wanted people to learn as a result of visiting the University Museum. So we created style guidelines and an interpretive template for the curators who were producing text in the museum, and this helped create a uniform approach. And it also made sure that the learning needs of those different audiences were very much at the heart of what we were creating. So we set some generic learning outcomes for the different areas and the different galleries. And these very much focused on the following areas, in knowledge and understanding, and this was very much learning facts and information about the university, skills development, teaching people how to develop a particular skill or learn something new, and this included us putting on very much practical arts and crafts sessions as part of our Learning and Access programme. Attitudes and feelings, sort of influencing perceptions, attitudes, perhaps something to do with the university's history or to do with the university itself. Enjoyment, inspiration, and creativity. So within the galleries, we have included stories about quirky or little-known figures in university history to sort of surprise our visitors. And of course, we have a lot of interactives in the museum because we want people to actually be creative while they're there as well. And finally, activity, behaviour and progression. This is what people do or intend to do as a result of actually visiting our museum. And of course, one of those things is we hope that they will return again to see something new. So we used a variety of different methods of display within the exhibition to achieve something for people of all of these different learning styles to enjoy. And you'll see some of the images on the screen. And while we did this identification of learning outcomes on a large and permanent scale at the very start of the project, it's actually something we do regularly throughout the planning process for our temporary exhibitions programme. So we actually identify target audiences, we identify these learning outcomes for every exhibition that we put on to make sure that they're always feeding back to what our audience want and what we would like them to learn. We did, of course, encounter many issues in converting an old building into a new museum, and we had to keep collections care and the needs of our visitors at the forefront. So we designed a building with very few windows to reduce light exposure. The archival material and rare books are mainly fitted out in drawers underneath display cases, so again, to reduce the light exposure. Physical access issues were able to be addressed by keeping the galleries on the ground floor and also doing things like installing a lift to the first floor. The University of St Andrews was very keen that Musa would be an environmentally sustainable building, so you'll see some of the features that were installed, such as the solar panel and the ground source heat pumps. And interestingly, there has been huge public interest in these elements of the museum. So we do quite a lot to interpret this on our roof terrace to sort of show the links between the museum and its natural environment that it's situated within. So we have carried out a lot of evaluation work to make sure that we're actually achieving those learning outcomes that we set out to. Mainly because we want to, of course, attract repeat visitors. We want to be relevant to our visitors. We employed an audience development officer a few years ago as part of a government-funded project, and he identified how we were meeting our learning outcomes. There were some interesting findings, such as the fact that Gallery 4 was not working particularly well, in that visitors didn't understand the theme of why museums collected. So what we have done is change that to a temporary exhibitions space where we can go into much more depth about the individual collections we have. The shop was particularly poor, and this came out in a lot of our visitor research. So we have completely redeveloped that, really in response to the fact that non-gallery elements do contribute to a visitor's experience of the museum, and that helps to sort of form their sort of opinion of your museum as a whole and whether they will return again. So we also spent quite a lot of money in developing the non-gallery elements in response to a lot of the evaluation we'd received. So we increased the scope of our Learning and Access program. Again, you can see some figures on the screen. We have a large variety of events. We try and target all of those target audiences. And the program is very much based on our core collections, but also on the temporary exhibitions program as well. So very much Musa has been a success. And as the figures show, we're growing year on year. And looking to the future, what Musa means to the university, we're very keen to serve our parent institution. We offer a great deal of teaching. We also offer student placements and voluntary placements, including 2 one-year-long paid internships for postgraduates. We offer research topics. We offer a research space for researchers to come in and work with us. We mount exhibitions with academics in the university so they can showcase their work and demonstrate the impact of what they're actually researching. Last year, in 2013, was our 600th anniversary, and we became really the focal point for those anniversary celebrations. We staged a large international loan exhibition of medieval maces. We borrowed medieval maces from across Europe, and that really made us the center of those anniversary celebrations. We, of course, are increasing our visitor figures and public engagement figures. We've recently restructured our staffing to kind of build capacity to help meet these increasing demands, both from within the university and outside. There is a greater emphasis on research that we're finding, both generated internally and working collaboratively, and we're working positively to meet these needs. And of course, we want to extend our temporary exhibitions program. So in summary, interpretation of our collections and telling stories is really at the very heart of what Musa is about. We did consider how to approach this very carefully whenever we created Musa, and evaluation tells us that we have actually achieved this, but importantly, we're still doing it. We still very much consider what our audience wants, and those different learning styles, the different learning outcomes, and we feel that this helps us connect with our audiences and sort of makes those most meaningful connections between collections and audiences, which are so important for museums. Thank you.